You have cited the productivity cost of unsupported fertility journeys. Where do you see AI and digital tools genuinely making a difference, and what could be improved?
It can also help from a kind of clinician point of view, because the amount of time that you have people coming to you saying, I'm really struggling with this IVF cycle, and you don't know what it is to stay on a adjusted fit note or work duties, the clinician can look and adapt and quickly scan and know exactly what they need to. That is one angle that sits alongside the workplace, the psychological safety, and it's about doing it all together, not just one isolated fix.
If an executive had to decide what to invest in, a platform like Fertilia AI or policy and training platform, how should they weigh the two?
I think the two go hand in hand, right? The enabler is the platform, whichever platform. Without the policy, you don't have the framework. We have to factor in that there are lots of small businesses out there that may not have the budget for big platforms. So we want to be able to have something that's accessible to all businesses, 1 to 10 sized people businesses, as alongside the corporate.
Caroline, what's the next step for you looking like?
If I'm honest, I think this is going to travel in the same direction that menopause has gone in. So we know that from next year, 2027, organizations that have more than 250 employees in their companies, they're going to need to show proof that they have these menopause policies and action plans in place. These policies are going to continue to come. So it's in the interest of organizations who want to be ahead of the game to really get on board with the platforms that Divpreet and Clara are offering and to invest in their organizations.
Welcome to the Digital Pulse, the podcast that explores the pharmaceutical life cycle through real world insights and practical strategies in AI and healthcare innovations. I'm your host, Shubhangi Dua, podcast producer and B2B journalist. Today, we're tackling a topic that doesn't get nearly enough airtime in pharma boardrooms: fertility in the workplace, and how technology is starting to close a gap that policy alone hasn't. I'm joined by three guests who each bring a different piece of this puzzle. First, Clara Toombs, founder at Fertilia AI, who's building an AI driven platform to decode healthcare data for faster clarity in understanding fertility journeys. Next, Caroline Biddle, founder at Working Through Fertility, whose research focuses on how line managers support employees through fertility treatment. And Dr. Divpreet Sacha, GP at Neko Health, co-founder at HHEI, the Hormonal Health Equity Initiative, and digital safety officer who brings both clinical and occupational health expertise to this conversation. Clara, Caroline, Divpreet, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you all three on together.
Oh, it's
How are
great
you
to
doing
be
today?
here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's
So,
lovely to be here.
right before we get into the main conversation, let's set the agenda for this episode. What's the one key message, or I suppose in a sentence, if you'd like to share something with the audience so they stay tuned in?
That policy and also health and tools all need to combine to allow for real world initiatives to improve overall fertility and reproductive care.
What about you, Clara?
I think we're at a really exciting time with technology and working with humans in the loop to create something that can be really impactful when it comes to fertility.
Yeah, so in my research, I've interviewed line managers from organisations that have fertility policy. And what's come from my research is that policy is not enough. There is a gap, and we need to work towards filling that gap.
Can each of you briefly introduce yourself to the audience and what work do you do within this space?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Caroline Biddle, and I'm based at the Centre for Decent Work and Productivity at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm a PhD researcher. I'm coming to the end of my PhD study, where I've been exploring line managers supporting women through fertility treatment. And alongside that, I have a business where I deliver training, talks, and workshops around reproductive health in the workplace. So that could be line managers supporting women through fertility treatments are very aligned with my research, but it could also be menstrual health. And like I say, reproductive health in general in the workplace.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clara. I'm founder of Fertilia AI. It's essentially a platform to help couples navigate the fertility journey, but it's also a side of the platform that helps clinicians work together with couples to make sense of the data and help them on the path to parenthood. In terms of fertility in the workplace, I have experienced that myself in a leadership position within the corporate world. I didn't feel supported when it came to fertility. I didn't share this information because I feared it would harm my promotional prospects. So I still think that was a few years ago. I still think things haven't improved enough and support and policies need to change.
So I am a GP that works at the intersection of preventative health, of women's health, of workplace health. And alongside my role at Neko, I also have two companies. One is Holistic Health, where I have created digital tools to help support people going through the workplace. And also that I've created a South Asian hormonal health platform that combines clinical and cultural insight. Secondly, I have a CIC, which brings together people from workplace, research, and lived experience and clinical experience, and looks at that cross-sector lens to deliver packages to FTSE 100 companies, improving hormonal health and also looking at health inequalities.
Thank you so much, all of you. So, Clara, let's start with you. What gap in workplace fertility support led you to build Fertilia AI, and how does the platform actually work?
Great question. Thank you. So, in terms of the gaps that exist, particularly from a patient perspective, there isn't enough support, and I'm sure Caroline will expand on this, in terms of how couples, not just females, but also males going through the fertility journey, how is that supported through the workplace? So there's certainly gaps in not only from a HR perspective, but also line manager perspective, but then also from a patient perspective, where do they go for resources? What questions can they raise within their workplace once they're going through treatment? Because, there is a perception that once you're going through treatment, you need lots of time off. So patients are actually going through this alone, and often they're not disclosing this information. I have experienced this firsthand. In terms of Fertilia AI, the platform is primarily designed for patients on the fertility journey and working with their clinicians. And ultimately, how it works is you upload your test results, and AI support takes you through the platform and helps you make sense of your data so that when you meet with your clinician, you are all on the same page when it comes to your fertility health. We are building the platform from the ground up for couples, not just females, which up till now has been the main focus, but we really need to start looking at the couple holistically. So in terms of using and utilizing AI and where we are today, but working with expert humans in the loop to ensure we are getting those answers much more quickly and therefore hopefully leading to a good outcome for patients.
Is there a reason why patients are not disclosing what's really happening? Is it the healthcare industry? What is the main cause?
I think in the workplace context, there is a fear that, particularly for women, and I can only speak from my own experience and experience of others I know in this position, that we have to work really hard to get that next promotion. And personally, for me, I didn't want to reveal anything that could hinder my ambition to be promoted. I felt that if I disclosed that information, there would be silent decisions made about perhaps removing me off certain projects. So I've seen it happen to others, and I knew that that was something I wanted to keep fiercely protected. However, the downside of that is that I'm then not getting the support I need. Imagine, if you're in a particularly stressful role, you have large teams to manage, there's a lot of stress on you as an individual. And when you're going through fertility treatment, that is something you really need to be very mindful of. So I think it's really a fear and perception of being perhaps silently removed from key projects, perhaps your path to promotion is hindered in some way.
I was going to say, to jump in there from what Clara said, so a lot of the research is focused around women for that reason. So when women go through fertility treatment, the research shows that it's their careers that are affected, their progression, so the examples that Clara's just given. Whereas men, yes, men are impacted and distressed in the moment, but their careers aren't affected, which is why my research focuses on line managers supporting women, because speaking from my personal experience, and I'm sure my husband won't mind me sharing this, but we went through fertility treatment and that was due to male factor infertility. So alone, my fertility was great, but as a couple, we were infertile. So yes, he had his complications, his sort of personal journey. That word's vile, isn't it? But what he was going on. But it was my body, it was my career, it was my progression, it was all that's impacted, and that's why this research in the workplace is so important to focus on women. And women are going through it in silence. So pretty much everything that Clara's just said, because they don't want to be passed over for promotion and because it's their private lives.
I just wanted to add that when you're going through treatment, it's deeply personal. And to share that with a line manager who's not necessarily equipped to support you, it can feel very risky to share that information and disclose that information to your line manager. And so there has to be that feeling of safety and trust that doesn't always exist. I had a good relationship with I've left the corporate world now, but when I was in the corporate world, I did have a good relationship, but I still didn't feel I could disclose this information. And so I think a lot of women are in my position.
Do you think it's because there's a lack of policy or the right kind of policy in place or not in place? What is the human cost of the policy gap that exists?
I would say that policy is difficult. Psychological safety is key. Policy allows for there to be a clear framework, but the problem is that no two individuals are the same. And also there are no clear connecting dots between the workplace and clinical input and also the individual case. And that's what I've seen across my personal story and from a clinical angle from occupational health and also from a GP perspective. Clinicians are not taught around the specific different stages when it comes to workplace and also the connection between fertility treatment and the workplace. And line managers don't have time to know all the different nuances. So there is a clear system flaw.
And I think there's definitely room for policy. So like I said, the workplaces that I've researched, they all have fertility treatment policies in place. And that is a really good foundation, because if you think there's an employee, male or female, going through fertility treatment, and they want to know whether they're going to be supported through fertility treatment, if they look on the workplace intranet and they see, oh, there's a fertility workplace company, I've got access to flexible working, I have, let's say, 8 days paid leave per year to go off and have fertility treatment, that is a great starting point. But like Divpreet said, and like Clara said, that line managers don't have that training. So we then have this, what could potentially become a recruitment and retention issue. So we know that Gen Zers, which are, those born between 97 and 2012, they are less likely to show. So there's a recruitment, it could potentially be a recruitment and retention issue. And generation, so Gen Z, who are those born between 1997 and 2012, they are less likely to show loyalty to companies. So 69% of Gen Z want to work for an organisation that aligns with their values. So they are going to vote with their feet if these policies aren't in place, if their line managers aren't supporting them on the personal issues they're going through. They are gone. Recruitment and retention issue, it has impact on employees. And the solution to this, as well as the AI that both Clara and Divpreet are talking about today. So as well as having these fertility platforms and these policies, it's also important to have the training for the line managers. And my research, line managers told me that they wanted to support employees, but they didn't know what to say, how to support them. And so working through Fertility, my organisation, we go in and, there's the option of talk. So we're just delivering awareness, or it could be workshops for small group of line managers, or training with a larger cohort. And this is sort of like a step-by-step process of what you need to do as a line manager, so that you have a better understanding. And it's not about line managers becoming experts, because they are the squeezed middle people. They've got lots on, they're managing people and they're managing their own workload. So it's really working with line managers to make them feel more confident in the support they're offering.
Divpreet, you have cited the productivity cost of unsupported fertility journeys. Where do you see AI and digital tools genuinely making a difference, and what could be improved?
For me, AI is about streamlining the process, and it can give tailored advice for specific situations. The line manager is able to understand what a frozen cycle is, or what certain medications are, and how that can impact productivity and certain adjustments. It can also help from a kind of clinician point of view, because the amount of time that you have people coming to you saying, I'm really struggling with this IVF cycle, and you don't know what it is to stay on a adjusted fit note or work duties, the clinician can look and adapt and quickly scan and know exactly what they need to. So again, it's all about human in the loop. We're just streamlining the process. That is one angle that sits alongside the workplace, the psychological safety, and it's about doing it all together, not just one isolated fix.
If all three of you had to come together and you were given the task to kind of uh, make these, I guess, pharma companies or just the enterprise industry altogether, if you had to make a policy change and enforce it, how would you do it? What's the first thing that you would say and then act upon?
So I would say it's about reframing fertility as a life choice. And it's about looking at how we can get the right people all together in the right rooms and showing it from a productivity, from a lived experience and research angle, and co-designing it with that specific workforce, that pharma industry. What does the pharma industry do? How can we actually create a specific tailored strategy and actually design something that will benefit all employees and the company?
What would be that tailored strategy? If you had to do something today, what would be the first thing as part of that tailored strategy that you'd do?
So as I said, it would be looking at so how many, what are they cross country? What are the legal requirements? What do people's provision require? So for instance, like in the NHS, you have different ICBs and different waiting list times. So it is a huge, huge undertaking. So it's like, you would then look at America, a lot of them have health insurance treatments. So you would have to look at what provisions are in each area, what the employee demographic is like, what the kind of psychological safety is like. So employing workplace tools. So you have things like HSE management standards, which looks at workplace culture, then applying the principles of fertility treatment and actually developing that all together, which is a huge undertaking. But actually, if it was delivered well, it could really change what fertility was like in the workplace and how people would stay in their jobs.
I think from my perspective, it would be using technology to speed up the process of raising awareness and breaking down taboos so that this doesn't become like an isolated sort of minority thing that you do, but actually it's everyone is thinking at some point whether they want to have children or not. And so we should just stop treating it like it's, yeah, exactly like Divpreet said, like a life choice. This is a right that we all have. And with people working longer and companies encouraging egg freezing, which is a topic in itself for another podcast, the idea that people are working longer and later in their careers, particularly women, is having a knock-on effect on then the success of going on to have children. So for me, I think it's, if I had to get kind of great minds in a room, including Caroline and Divpreet, I'd be looking at it from a tech perspective. How can we take all this knowledge, apply it into policies that can be easily distributed, looking at the macro situation that we're in at the moment with declining birth rates, not just in the UK, but globally across many, many countries. I've had a few conversations with people in China because they have, as we know, a declining birth rate. So they're interested in products like what we are developing at and building at Fertilia. So for me, it's about how do we use technology in a healthy way, an ethical way, to distribute awareness, break down taboos, and really drive forward the whole the ease of going through fertility treatment, so this doesn't become a burden for employees, for patients, or employers.
Looking at policy, it's not just policy alone. We need to look at what attributes sit alongside policy. So let's look at support. So it's about getting in there. And so what Divpreet said about creating these bespoke programs for workplaces. So it'd be, if working with schools, for example, that's very different to working with a pharmaceutical company. So it's talking to line managers, talking to HR, talking to employees, really finding out about what the issues are there, and then going, okay, let's look at support in this industry. Let's look at capacity. And then also the relationships. Relationships has been a big part of, what's come from my research, a really big theme, that these close relationships between line manager and employee, they enable support and also output for the business. And, it goes on. There's lots of different sub themes within that. So it's looking at what everyone needs within the business and then really tailoring that so that it's these attributes sit nicely alongside the policy.
Now, let's put this into action. Let's say, Clara, we are talking about Fertilia AI. How is this helping women in the workplace directly, and how is that making a change already?
So our initial plan is to get it into the hands of consumers. But on our roadmap, we want to work with workplaces to provide information that's easily accessible, both for line managers, employers, as well as patients, and connecting the dots, as was meant. The phrase mentioned earlier is about how we use technology to make this process a lot more comprehensive. So it becomes a case of, as a line manager, knowing what information you might want to have access to in terms of resources, but also with patients as well. So initially it will be around resources, but our goal is to make this much more comprehensive. So a whole host of support within the platform, such as coaches, therapists, nutritionists, etc. Really, our goal more broadly is to provide that support that isn't currently in place for patients, and also therefore helping clinicians as part of the process.
So what I would say is that the platform that I've developed actually gives tailored, bespoke advice depending on what stage you're in fertility treatment, whether it's the man going through surgical sperm extraction or the woman that is having a frozen cycle and being put into hormonal menopause. And it gives outputs that the employee can use to have briefing scripts with the manager, to adjust their schedules. It also has safety tools. So say you don't feel comfortable saying to your manager that you're going through fertility treatment, it actually just says, I'm going through procedures by which I may need to go to the hospital at a short notice. I would ask for these specific adjustments. It also gives line manager briefings. So say you are approached by an employee and says that, oh, I'm going to be going through a natural medicated cycle. The manager doesn't know what that means. This actually explains it to them and gives helpful resources to kind of give tailored advice. And finally, it also gives it to clinicians. So say a GP doesn't know what that process involves, they can also quickly skim and brief, and it adjusts it for every single phase. So that is when I'm talking about streamlining from a kind of workplace, from a personal lens, from a clinical lens. My tool is to try and streamline it for everyone.
And because health is also very person specific, so I understand with regards to not just an individual, any company that you're dealing with and helping them set their policy, I get that it has to be quite tailored to what they already have, and then we go in from there. But in the sense of what your platform has to offer from a technological perspective, in terms of how it's already making a difference right now.
Yeah, so mine isn't an AI platform. That's very much Clara and Divpreet's area. Mine's about starting the conversations. So it's me turning up to the talks and the workshops and the training. It's very much having these conversations, exploring the taboos, breaking those down. And it's bespoke. So there's no two sessions are the same. It's about sitting down with HR, doing that deep dive, finding out what managers want to get right. And it's very much grounded in academic research and, using that to move forward to inform workplaces.
If an executive had to decide what to invest in, a platform like Fertilia AI or policy and training platform, how should they weigh the two?
I think the two go hand in hand, right? The enabler is the platform, whichever platform, and it's great to hear that there's more support in this space. But I think without the policy, you don't have the framework. For me, it's not a case of one or the other. I think you need both. So the policy provides the guidelines and the guardrails and the safety and the essentially the process to follow. And then the platform is the enabler, the tech that enables that to happen for the company. And I think, we have to factor in that, there are lots of small businesses out there that may not have the budget for big platforms. So we want to be able to have something that's accessible to all businesses, even, those kind of small 1 to 10 sized people businesses, as alongside the corporate huge budgets that they have. I think it really is a combination of both policy and not just policy that's delivered on an all hands to say we've got a new policy, off you go. We need the actual practical execution of that. How, as Caroline has been saying, and Divpreet, how do we actually get people, line managers, using the policy, understanding the policy? What do they do if this scenario happens? And then, platforms are enablers. And I think I'm all for having more platforms out there for fertility, particularly in the workplace. Our platform's focused on ultimately helping the couple through fertility, regardless of, obviously within the workplace too, and also clinicians. But the more support, I think, in this space, the better, because at the moment there's very little.
So what I would say is that rather than looking at it from a policy or a tech angle, look at investing in a company that can combine both. And they can speak with you and say, what is it that you think we need? Just as Clara said, it's not a one tick spot all. It's around finding the right people that can deliver the right package.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, these organisations can have tokenistic policies in place, as Divpreet said. And because they've just been put there and not promoted, managers aren't aware of them. So I spoke to a manager during my research where he was telling me, and he sounded like a great guy, he was telling me that he had encouraged a woman on his team to work flexibly, to use a couple of days of annual leave. And I was the one to say to him, oh, but you do know there's 2 weeks of leave there, like 10 days, for fertility treatment. And he was completely shocked and embarrassed. So it's making the most of these awareness days. We've got National Fertility Awareness Week in November, and HR or the wellbeing team really leaning into that and promoting, infertility awareness.
Okay, last question for all of you. Looking ahead, what is the next step look like for Fertilia AI or similar platforms, or for workplace fertility support more broadly?
So for Fertilia, we are working on our MVP and getting live in the next couple of months. alongside that, we are working to build our strategic partnerships within the platform. So male fertility testing kits, that kind of thing, coaches, essentially building out a support network for people so that we have the best of both worlds. We have tech, doing a lot of the legwork and really helping clinicians as well with, some clinicians have said to me they're getting up at 4 a.m. to read notes when actually that doesn't need to happen now with technology. We can present a view to them that gives them the latest information for the couple. And so for me, it's about, how do we use tech in, the most effective way? So I think, there's a lot of opportunity ahead, but right now we're focusing on going live and strategic partnerships.
So for me, Fertility is now ready to be demoed, and it's about recruiting the right companies that are willing to invest in their workforce, as well as for HHEI. We are forming our expert panel, which looks at people like researchers like Caroline and others, and really coming together to deliver bespoke packages whereby we can say we've got a whole host of clinicians, researchers, workforce, HR leads. Let's actually deliver what is right for your company.
Caroline, what's the next step for you looking like?
So I think at the moment this is looked at as a nice to have, right? Like it's not something that employers have to have in place. But if I'm honest, I think this is going to travel in the same direction that menopause has gone in. So we know that from next year, 2027, organizations that have more than 250 employees in their companies, they're going to need to show proof that they have these menopause policies and action plans in place. And I don't think it's going to be too far behind before all these other really important policies. I'm going to say for women, I know that we spoke about fertility treatment being for men and women, but then we know from the research also that it affects women's bodies and women's careers in the workplace. So yeah, these policies are going to continue to come. So it's in the interest of organizations who want to be ahead of the game to really get on board with the platforms that Divpreet and Clara are offering and to invest in their organizations. We've already spoke about Gen Z, voting with their feet, and if the policies aren't there, they are not going to be interested. So yeah, continuing to deliver the training, raise awareness, and work with forward-thinking organizations.
Great. Thank you so much, Clara, Caroline, Divpreet, for such a grounded look at where AI and workplace fertility support are headed and for being honest about what technology can and can't fix on its own.
So for more information about how you can work with me, if you go to workingthroughfertility.com and you can access all the information there.
We are building our waitlist and we are close to launching. So if you'd love to find out more as a patient or patients on the fertility journey, or if you're a clinician and interested to know what that looks like for you, then join waitlist.fertilia.ai.
If you would like to learn more, then please visit hhei.org.uk, or to look at our demo platform, you can look at optifertility.ocuher.co.uk. Alternatively, you can also email us at info@hhei.org.uk.
If you want to follow up on anything that you've heard today, you can find Clara and Fertilia AI's platform at fertilia.ai. Learn more about Caroline's training and consultancy work through Working Through Fertility, and find out more about Dr. Divpreet's work with the Hormonal Health Equity Initiative, HHEI. To our Pharmatica community, thanks so much for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, please follow, rate, and share. Join the conversation on X and LinkedIn at pharmatica.io, or visit our website pharmatica.io for more expert insights. That's it for this episode for Digital Pulse. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.